think it's kind of weird that I haven't really talked about the Final Fantasy series much up until now. I mean, I mentioned it in passing, but it's never been really talked about by me. I mean, not in great detail when I, wasn't being a complete idiot. Particularly in terms of Final Fantasy VII. See, a lot of people think that I don't like 7, which isn't true. I think 7 is a great game. I just have to play middleman on it, because I have to do that every fucking time. For some reason, I always find myself in the position of not liking something as much as a lot of people do, but not outright hating something like a lot of people do. So I'm sort of caught in the middle here, especially on 7. See, I think 7's a great RPG by every stretch of the imagination, but I don't think it's that good. So I'm sort of caught in the situation where everyone's gonna get mad at me by the end of this, because I'm not gonna say it's that awesome, but I'm not gonna say it's that terrible, and you're all just gonna deal with it because I don't give a fuck. Remember? New policy on that? Okay, let's just go. We're just going. Yes! Final Fantasy VII was an awesome game, and it is an awesome game, and it was back when Final Fantasy didn't suck! Sorry, I'm a little bitter about certain other Final Fantasy games that may or may not be awful in every conceivable way. Look, let's get back to 7. Alright, the story centers around a character by the name of Cloud Strife, who's this spiky-haired blonde guy who wields a ridiculously large sword. And he's working with this organization called Avalanche, and they're blowing up these power plant Mako reactors, and basically they're trying to stop this evil corporation called Shinra that's removing Mako from the planet to use as a power source. But the problem is Mako is the planet's lifeblood, so like they're killing the planet, and they have to stop them by blowing everything up. It's sort of this weird situation. A lot of people actually like to point out flaws here, that you're working for this terrorist organization. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, let's blow up the Mako reactors and, cause, undue infrastructure damage. But even in the game, the characters who are a part of Avalanche are questioning their actions, because they've killed a lot of people, to try to stop Shinra, and they're not even sure if the ends justify the means anymore. So it's not like the game isn't completely aware of this sort of double-edged sword. The plot, the narrative overall, is actually really good, and I go into detail, but I don't want to, because I know most people have probably played 7, but I feel like a lot of you haven't played 7, and I'm like, should I spoil this? That's actually where I've been going back and forth in my head so far. A lot of people who review RPGs go into great lengths to review the plot and cover every hole and cover every nuance. And you know what? I decided, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm going to give you the rough synopsis. I'm going to point out things that I like about it, things that I don't like about it, whatever. But I'm not going to spoil everything, and I'm not going to go into super duper in-depth detail over the story, because that's one of the big reasons you should play this game, is the plot, because the plot overall is really good. And to give you the rough synopsis, basically the situation turns out to be more drastic than everyone realizes when it's revealed that a person from Cloud's past, a super soldier named Sephiroth, has returned and is going to kill people, I guess. Actually, Sephiroth's plan is one thing that I actually have to complain about, but we're going to talk about him later. But you go on this quest to save the world. That's what it turns into. It turns into just stopping Shinra, into saving the entire planet from destruction, which is standard Final Fantasy fare. And you know what? Actually, I'm going to stop here, because I want to talk about the game's mechanics before I really get into the story. Because story and characters, that's a part we got to keep separate from the actual review of an RPG. Because when it comes to RPGs, the story and characters mean a hell of a lot more than in, say, a first-person shooter. So we're going to go into the mechanics of the game, and I'm going to try to explain how the game functions, and the graphics, and the sound. Yeah, graphics for the time are actually alright for the most part. The in-battle character models, because this is one of those random encounter RPGs, look great, and the cinematics look great as well, especially for the time, but the in-game graphics, I seriously need to call into question. The backgrounds look fine, they're nicely detailed. It's the character models that drive me nuts. They look like they're made of Legos. They're just really, really, really blocky, and It drives me crazy. This is something that would be rectified in later installments of Final Fantasy, but it's one part of the game that I feel just hasn't aged too well. And am I the only one on this planet who is bothered by the fact that the characters in your party rejoin your party by walking into you and blipping out of existence? That's like, it's really weird to me, and it's always driven me nuts. I don't know why. Whatever, it's an older game, you know, you can't, you know, bitch too much about the graphics. And if it, like I said, for the most part, they look fine. Sound is actually fantastic. This is one of the best musical scores you could ask for in a role-playing game. It's one of the most memorable soundtracks I've ever experienced in a video game. So, full marks for the sound. As for game mechanics, well, as it turns out, the battle is more than just hit things with spells. You have to strategize based on every encounter because enemies do different things. There's situations that call for not attacking and waiting for an enemy to stop doing a certain thing before you attack. There are times where certain types of magic are more effective. There are times where summons are a better idea, or there are times where you just shouldn't use magic at all and should just hit them with physical attacks. It's really nice that it's not just a standard mash the attack button fare. You actually have to think, and I like that. Equipping your party is simple but effective. It uses a system involving materia, which is the source of magic in the in-game world. Basically, the idea is that you have 3 different kinds of equipment you can put on your characters. 2 of them have materia slots, and each weapon has a different amount of materia slots. Some of those slots are linked, because, you know, you can use certain materia with other materia to create new effects, for the basic one being using the all materia to make it so that the magic spell hits every single enemy as opposed to just one. There's things like that, and it's dependent on what kind of weapon you're using, how many slots it has, etc., etc. It leads to more thought process when it comes to placing your materia and equipping different weapons, because sometimes you might be in a situation where you won't use a certain weapon because it just doesn't have enough materia slots. Say you want a specific character to be a mage. Well, if you want them to do that, then you're not too worried about equipping the strongest weapon. You're probably more concerned about materia openings, so you're probably going to give them a weapon with more materia slots rather than one with just, you know, a few but more attack power, since you're not going to be physically attacking with that character. In addition, other than the materia's basic spells, you also have to keep in mind the stat buffs and, you know, debuffs they give your characters. For example, Cloud is a strong physical attacker, but you can give him magic if you want. The inherent and main problem I have with doing that is it lowers his HP by quite a bit, so you have to be careful with how much magic you give a character, especially if you're making them a bruiser like Cloud. You don't want to give them too much magic because that's going to lower your attack power and your HP. The summons, which are larger magical attacks, and a staple in the Final Fantasy universe, give different stat buffs based on what summon it is. Some actually help if you're a bruiser, and some don't. Again, it all depends. You have to think about where you're placing your materia. You can't just go throwing it out willy-nilly. On top of that, I also have to discuss the limit breaks, which are another staple of Final Fantasy VII. Basically, they're stronger super attacks that get used if your character takes a certain amount of damage. The limit breaks are powerful, but are varied among the characters. They all have different effects. Some are just outright attacks. Others are stat buffs that you give to your party. For example, Aeris's main one, and one of the reasons you would use her in the party, is that it's a global heal. It heals all your party members. It makes her very useful as a white mage. Whereas Cloud's first limit break, Braver, is just a really strong attack. The overworld in this game is actually quite enjoyable, and exploration is encouraged. There's a ton of different side quests to do. It isn't just about the main quest, although if you focus directly on that, avoiding the side quests, you aren't going to get stuck and have to go back to grind too often. The bosses of this game are actually quite fun and unique. Everyone does something different, usually involving a super attack or different stat ailments they'll give to your party. And again, it always leads to you having to treat each boss in a unique manner. Another thing I like about the game is that there's different mini-games you can play. It's not just standard RPG battles straight up affair. There's tons of different stuff to do. Part of the main story as well. For example, early on, there's this motorbiking segment, which is actually a ton of fun. And later, there's a snowboarding segment that I'm terrible at. You can go to the Gold Saucer, which has a ton of different stuff to do, including the famous chocobo races. They work just like horse races in real life, except chocobos. And I remember everyone loves this part of the game for some reason. It's just a lot of fun, I don't know why. Although, don't even get me started on chocobo breeding. That is a beast of a topic in itself, and I don't even want to go into it. But you know what? I've talked about how good the game is a lot so far. Let me talk about problems I have with it, because there are things I don't like about it, and things that could have been better. For one, there are times in the game that make you stop and do something really stupid in order to progress. In addition, as much as I love the Materia system for its simplicity, I have to complain about its simplicity. It's just too simple, and my issue with that is it basically makes it so that you can make any character anything you want. And you might say, well, doesn't that lead to, further options? And sure, yeah, it does, but my problem with this is, why would you bother using certain characters over others? Like, as much as I like Kate Sith as a character, I never use him in the fights because there's always a better option. Like, a party of Cloud, Barret, and Tifa is just fine. Make Tifa a mage and have Cloud and Barret, use their stronger attacks. I mean, my point is that why would you use a weaker character when you can just make stronger ones do the same stuff, but with added benefits of having strong physical attacks? But in a counter argument to myself, like I said, Materia debuffs you, so it does make what would be strong characters weaker, and other characters like Aerith, again, are much better at being mages than, say, Tifa or Cloud. And again, Aerith's Limit Break, has a built-in thing where it heals you, so I guess I'm sort of defeating my own argument when I point that out. And there is a class system in Final Fantasy VII, it's just not as obvious or clear-cut when you can give anybody any materia you want. I also need to talk about characters. Now, overall, Final Fantasy VII has a cast of great characters, and I'm not gonna sit here and bitch about Sephiroth, but I am gonna sit here and bitch about Sephiroth. I can't stand how the Final Fantasy VII fanbase treats this guy. They talk like, oh, he's so cool and he's so badass. No, neither of these words are effective at describing Sephiroth in any stretch of the imagination. Maybe in Crisis Core before he went insane, but that's sort of my issue. When it comes to Final Fantasy VII, the dude is out of his mind. He's nuts. Batshit. I mean, Jesus, you wouldn't know. Do you even remember what his plan is? His plan is to crash meteor into the planet and then be at the center of that wound to absorb all the energy that the planet will gather. Do you really? Oh, but this guy is badass. No joke, I actually once read a YouTube comment that said, oh my god, I wish Sephiroth was real. I don't. That would be bad. Why would you ever want that? This man is not stable, okay? No. No, I mean, he's a good villain. I would never say that he isn't. But he's, a lot of people get into arguments about who's a better villain, Kefka or Sephiroth. They're not that different. They're both fucking nuts. They're just a different form of nuts. Like, Kefka is just more like the Joker, basically. I mean, I guess it's a fair comparison for him. Whereas Sephiroth is more of a controlled crazy. But they're both still crazy! And getting back to the story of Final Fantasy VII, I forgot this, but 7 is a lot darker compared to most other Final Fantasies. I mean, Jesus, some of this stuff is really messed up, especially when you start talking about Jenova and what that thing even does, and what its origins are. I mean, Christ, a lot of people die in this game. I mean, I'm not saying that's like it's a bad thing. I mean, I think the Jenova concept is cool. But there's a character I really have to discuss because a lot of the haters like to focus on her. And it's not fair. But to tell you what, the fans of the game have no one to blame for it but themselves. Aerith. Or Aerith, alternatively. By the way, if anyone's gonna sit here and try to correct me whenever I say Aerith, I'm sorry. That's how I say her name. The funny part is that neither pronunciation is technically wrong in a sense. It's just a translation issue, because according to my research, they pronounce it Aerith in Japanese, but when you translate it to English, it's supposed to be Aerith, because they're trying to say, a take on the word Earth, sort of, but they say it Aerith in Japan. I say Aerith. It can also be called Aerith. That's what every game since 7 has called her. It doesn't matter. Let it go. What I was going to say is that Aeris's death. Let's talk about this, because everyone likes to go and talk about this. And you know what? It's a really sad scene. It is. Okay, Aeris is a really good character. I like Aeris a lot. And the scene was sad. It was. But, you know, I think the fans of Final Fantasy VII had no one to blame for this, for themselves, like I said, because of course the haters are gonna talk about, oh, that scene wasn't that sad, you're all a bunch of pussies, when you constantly, and I mean incessantly, mention how sad the scene was. It's viewed as one of the saddest scenes in video game history, which I don't necessarily agree with, but it's still a really moving and sad scene. I mean, it's not that it isn't, it's just that it's overplayed, I think, is the problem here. But you know, in the defense of the game, a lot of the haters like to say, oh, that one scene proves that the game's narrative sucks, so that scene wasn't sad at all. But there's plenty of examples of sad and deep moments within the same game. It's not just Aeris's death. Just to rattle off a few here. Oh, let's see, how about, oh, I don't know, the story of Aeris's mom, like her adoptive mother, and how she kept going to the station, waiting for her husband to come back. Yeah, that was pretty sad. Okay, how about, basically everything to do with Cloud regaining his memory? Yeah, that was pretty sad. How about, oh my god, the story of Red 13's dad. Jesus, Red 13's dad. Come on now, you don't. That was, wow. I mean, that was, damn. Oh, the story of Sid's rocket and you know how him, you know, and him going to space. That was sad. Basically everything about Vincent is pretty sad. Or shit, how about Kate's sacrifice at the Temple of the Ancients? Yeah, how about that? My point is that this narrative is chock full of deep, moving, well-written, scripted moments that just tug at your heartstrings. I mean, it's a good story, and it's not just Aeris's death. As sad as it was, that wasn't the only thing. How about as someone who loves Crisis Core and thinks that game is fantastic, how about that ending, and how about Zack? I mean, I knew that was coming, but I didn't know that was coming. Jesus! I mean, come on! I mean, everyone needs to lay off. Okay, the game isn't overrated, sure, but it's still great. I mean, and I'm not gonna sit here and try to, you know, look for flaws where there are none. It's a good game, and the narrative is fantastic. Period. I'm sorry, I can't be complete bad guy on this. I like Final Fantasy VII. And, you know, it's really hard for me to review a good game, you know. I actually have always had that problem. Whenever I go to talk about something I like, I run out of stuff to say. You might say, well, didn't you do a great job on that Tomb Raider retrospective? Well, yeah, but I don't even know why I was able to do that. And in fact, it was pretty difficult for me to talk about sometimes. But I'm going to sit here and I'm going to try to talk about some of my favorite parts of Final Fantasy VII in closing, just to try to get people who haven't played the game to give it a try. Alright, let's start somewhere. You know, I really like the stairs climbing segment when you're infiltrating the Shinra building. I like infiltrating the Shinra building to begin with. I sort of like espionage in games, and I thought that was a really cool moment. But the stair climbing, as tedious as it was, they made it funny. Like every single floor, Barrett is just bitching about the stairs. And it's comedy gold. I love it. Speaking of sneaking into places, I also like the part where Cloud dresses up in a Shinra uniform and has to sneak in, you know, in army disguises. And of course that leads into another, you know, comedic gold moment where everyone's disguised as Shinra personnel on this ship, and you have to run around and find everybody. And when you find Red 13, who's this, you know, cat dog-like thing, standing on two legs, with the most, you know, transparent disguise ever. Like, nobody notices it. It's just fantastic. I also like the part where you get to escape from execution at the beginning of the second disc. That was a lot of fun, especially since Kate totally pulled through for you at the end. That was great. But I'll tell you the best part of the game. The best goddamn part of the game. See, at some point in the game, Cloud is missing, and you know, he's incapacitated, and he can't be your leader anymore. So they name a new leader. And they named this motherfucker the leader. Fucking Sid! manliest man around. Smoking cigs and drinking tea. That's it. And I always take this opportunity, since Tifa's caring for Cloud and Aerith is busy being dead at this point, to make the manliest man team around. My party consists of Sid, Mr. T, and Cat Dog Thing, and we go out and we do manly stuff to stop Shinra from taking the huge Materia. Manly American stuff! The first thing you do is you go to this reactor and you gotta stop a train. So you hijack another train to jump on the other train in a manly American way. And then you go and then you fight a bunch of robots on that train in a manly American way. And then you go up and you try to commandeer and stop the train in another manly American way. And then you fail at that because I always do. I don't know why. And then you have to go to another reactor where there's this goddamn eagle. Actually, I think it's a condor. Eagle American on top of it, and you have to go and you have to put an army out front, and I'm really bad at this and I always end up having to fight the army myself, but it's okay because they can never beat me because I'm too manly and American, because there isn't that prissy girls around to stop that. They're too busy in the kitchen making me manly sandwiches and tea, and I go back to visit Cloud, and then the ultimate weapon decides to attack me, but it's okay, because it can't handle my manly awesomeness. That's right, and it flies away like the pussy it is. America! But yeah, that's Final Fantasy VII, for the most part. I strongly recommend it, like seriously. It's a great game, and if you haven't played it, you are doing yourself a disservice not to. If you think that the fans are crazy and they're just overplaying what is probably just an average game, if you haven't tried it, please give it a try. You can get it on Steam now, probably on the PSN, actually definitely on the PSN, what am I talking about? Or if you're crazy, go get an original copy like me. Of course, I've had one since I was young, so that would probably be why I own one. But my point is that there's plenty of ways to get and play the game. By all means, give it a try. I mean, even if you don't like it, at least you tried it, now you know. Don't let the fans ruin what is a good game. Isn't that the most ironic thing in the world? People who love the game are actually making people hate it. I mean, go figure, right? The hell's that?